In one of the most fantastically bizarre stories in the early annals of the creature that was once Dr. Alec Holland, the Swamp Thing ventures into realms of the bizarre and horrific, as he confronts an unearthly collective of mutant worms, under the command of a mad scientist who wants to create a new world for humans underneath his control. Greetings and welcome to another installment of the DC Comics Silver and Bronze Age podcast. As usual, I'm your host Larry, and I'll be your intrepid guide as I feature back issues from DC Comics past, and together we will thrill to the adventures of your favorite DC Comics superheroes. The Swamp Thing is the uncanny superhero featured in this episode of the podcast today, and Swamp Thing number 11 from August of 1974 is the comic book we'll be exploring. The writer for this story was Len Wein. The interior art for the issue was done by Nestor Redondo, and the editor for the series was Joe Orlando. Unfortunately, no information for lettering or coloring for this comic book is known at this time. The Swamp Thing has wandered back to the area where his tragic transformation had originally taken place, the barn where he had installed his private laboratory, nothing but a pile of wooden wreckage. The muck-encrusted creature discovers that he had stood too long in one place onto the ground, taking root like a plant, then out of his frustration and despair over his apparent loss of his humanity, lashes out at thick trees within reach, crashing them to the ground. With his anger quickly depleted, the Swamp Thing wanders off, alone once more with his somber thoughts. Not far away, U.S. Agent Matt Cable and Abigail Arcane are crossing the bog where they are attacked by a mutated humanoid alligator, but before the reptilian monstrosity can attack, the Swamp Thing intervenes, forcing the attacking monster into the stagnant waters of the bog. The creature that was once Alec Holland soon emerges from the deep waters, defeating the mutated menace, leaving it drowned at the bottom of the bog. However, the danger for the trio of strangers is not quite over, as they are attacked by a duo of strangely alien-like worms, emerging from the dark corners of the marshland. The Swamp Thing is subdued by mental blasts from one of the worms, then Matt and Abigail are overpowered and taken to an underground base of operations. They awaken sometime later, then meet with 4 other captives. Matt, Abigail, and the 4 other prisoners are then escorted by the worms to a large chamber where an old man clad in a tattered uniform sits upon a carved throne. The man greets the group, calling himself Professor Zachary Nail, and he welcomes Matt and Abigail to the sunken sanctuary he calls New Eden. Displaying a fanatic's zeal, Nail explains his reasons behind building the domed sanctuary, using the worms to capture young people in the hopes of building a small community to repopulate the earth for what he supposes would be the eventual destruction of the rest of mankind through pollution. Meanwhile, the Swamp Thing follows the trail left behind by the mutant worms to a carven opening leading to an underground grotto. Inside the domed sanctuary, Cable and the rest of the prisoners act out a plan to distract their captors, with Cable acting dead. The worms investigate, not realizing it was a trick, and then are attacked. The man who was Alec Holland soon arrives at the sunken city, and then reaches the throne room and enters the fray, joining the others in attacking Nail and the worms. Cable grabs hold of Zachary Nail, threatening to kill him if the mutant creatures do not surrender. Nail beseeches the worms to obey, but is startled to learn by the worm things that it was they, and not Zachary Nail himself, who are the true masters of the situation. And it was their true intentions all along to merely save mankind so that they could feast upon them at some point in the future. In other words, the worms intended to save humanity only for a food source for themselves. Swamp Thing, Matt Cable, Abigail, and the other captives once more attack the worms, then flee out of the throne chamber, with Swamp Thing barricading the entrance. Nail escapes to another part of the domed sanctuary where one of the prisoners, a young black woman named Ruth, finds him with the New Eden's nuclear reactor, effectively setting it to overload and explode. Nail shoots the young black woman, killing her. Her boyfriend, Jefferson Bolt, distraught over seeing his girlfriend killed, wants to exact revenge for her death and kill the mad would-be ruler, but Swamp Thing intervenes, knocking the young black man out and escaping the sanctuary with the others. Safely away from the doomed, ruined New Eden, Swamp Thing and the others witness the final destruction of not only the domed haven, but also the death of its creator. Later in the night, the man that was once Alec Holland wanders off into the depths of the bayou to be by himself, then discovers a large red jewel with a 7-pointed star carved onto its face. The mossy man-brute touches the gemstone and then vanishes, only to reappear moments later in a prehistoric world where he is about to be menaced by a dinosaur. Now, so much for the synopsis of the Swamp Thing issue number 11. Quite an exciting issue with great art and writing, and the end of the book plunges the man monster into yet another potentially dangerous situation. Now, for some history concerning the superhero in question, Swamp Thing did not appear in his own series from the very beginning. In fact, his first appearance was in a standalone horror story in an issue of House of Secrets, number 92 from July of 1971. Created by writer Len Wein and renowned horror artist Bernie Wrightson, who had designed the look of the horror-themed superhero, Swamp Thing would receive his own series after his primary appearance, but with a slightly differing origin from the issue of House of Secrets, in Swamp Thing number 1 from November of 1972. In that history-making first issue, Alec Holland was transformed into the mossy man-brute when various samples of his biorestorative formula are splashed onto him during an explosion, set off by hostile agents working for a criminal organization called the Conclave. Holland flees into the Louisiana swampland, his body enveloped in flames before he falls seemingly dead into a bog. Unknown to anyone who thought Alec Holland was dead, including his wife Linda and his friend Defense Department intelligence agent Matt Cable, Holland soon emerges from the fetid bog from which he had fell, transformed by the biorestorative formula into a massive, hulking, muck-covered mockery of a man that DC Comics fans came to know and love as the Swamp Thing. Coincidentally, Matt Cable had erroneously believed that on that fateful night when he witnessed the Swamp Thing taking his revenge on the killers responsible for the death of his beloved wife and his tragic transformation, Cable thought it was the Swamp Thing himself who was responsible for the deaths of his friends, the Hollands. Now, talking about getting your signals crossed, it wasn't until issue 13 of the original run that the alleged truth about the connection between the mossy man monster and Alec Holland was finally revealed to Matt Cable and his constant companion Abigail Arcane, and that Alec Holland was indeed the Swamp Thing, or at least so he thought. It was also in that same issue that Len Wein would end his run on the comic book, the writing chores assigned to David McElhaney, Jerry Conway, and David Anthony Kraft to finish up the series. As far as the artwork, Bernie Wrightson would leave the series as well, finishing his final issue on number 10 before the art assignment was given to artist Nestor Redondo, getting the rest of the original series run up until the last issue, which was drawn by Fred Carrillo. I would have to say that the original comic book run of the Swamp Thing in the early 70s was the most horror-inspired as well as the most brutal and savage for some of the menaces the muck-encrusted man-brute would face. The first part of that memorable 1970s run would bring Swamp Thing into prominence with its themes of horror, suspense, frightening events, and gothic atmosphere. Thanks in no small part to the horror artist Bernie Wrightson and the excellent writing by Len Wein, I think the Swamp Thing's eerie and dark adventures during the first 10 issues stand out as being one of DC Comics' most horror-inspired titles during that time. It's no small wonder that those legendary 10 issues remain very popular in the minds of many DC Comics fans today. It's also worth noting that during that initial run, the Swamp Thing would be introduced to one of his most dangerous adversaries, the twisted dark genius of science and sorcery, Dr. Anton Arcane, as well as his uncanny mutated slaves, the Unmen. Now, before we head toward the end of this episode, I want to highlight some notable events which happened during August of 1974. So let's take a look at the rundown. August the 4th. A bomb explodes in a train between Italy and West Germany, killing 12 and wounding 48. Italian neo-fascists take responsibility. On August the 5th, the Watergate scandal. The smoking gun tape of June the 23rd, 1972 is revealed, in which President Richard Nixon and White House Chief of Staff H.R. Haldeman discussed using the Central Intelligence Agency to block a Federal Bureau of Investigation inquiry into Watergate. Nixon's support in Congress collapses. On August the 7th, 3 Republican congressional leaders, Barry Goldwater, Hugh Scott, and John Rhodes, visit President Nixon in the White House. They inform him that he lacks the votes to escape impeachment in the House of Representatives and conviction in the Senate. Goldwater urges Nixon to resign. Also on that day, French acrobat Philippe Petit walks across a high wire slung between the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in New York. August the 8th. The Watergate scandal continues. President Nixon announces his resignation, effective August the 9th. And on August the 9th, Richard Nixon becomes the first president of the United States to resign from office, an action taken to avoid being removed by impeachment and conviction in response to his role in the Watergate scandal. Vice President Gerald R. Ford becomes the 38th president upon Nixon's resignation, taking the oath of office in the East Room of the White House. On August the 14th, Turkey invades Cyprus for the second time, occupying 37% of the island's territory. Now also, on August the 14th, Greece withdraws its forces from NATO's military command structure as a result of the Turkish invasion of Cyprus. August the 30th, Public Law 93-400 is enacted, establishing the Office of Federal Procurement Policy. Now on the entertainment front, 1974 was a very profitable year for Hollywood, and it was also the year where the disaster movie genre would become quite profitable, but also was ripe for satire. Also, the blaxploitation film genre makes significant inroads with film-going audiences. The biggest box office winners for 1974, starting with the 10th most popular films, were as follows. Number 10, Benji from Mulberry Square Releasing. Number 9, The Longest Yard from Paramount. Number 8, The Life and Times of Grizzly Adams from Sun Classic Pictures. Number 7, Airport 1975 from Universal. Number 6, The Godfather Part 2 from Paramount. Number 5, Earthquake from Universal. Number 4, Young Frankenstein from 20th Century Fox. Number 3, The Trial of Billy Jack from Warner Brothers. Number 2, The Towering Inferno from 20th Century Fox, and the number 1 box office winner for the year 1974 went to the Mel Brooks classic satire of Western films, Blazing Saddles, from Warner Brothers. Other popular moneymakers for Hollywood during that year were as follows. The Apprenticeship of Duddy Kravitz, Black Belt Jones, Black Christmas, The Four Musketeers, Foxy Brown, The Golden Voyage of Sinbad, The Great Gatsby, Herbie Rides Again, The Lords of Flatbush, Murder on the Orient Express, The Parallax View, Phantom of the Paradise, The Taking of Pelham 123, Thunderbolt and Lightfoot, the James Bond film The Man with the Golden Gun starring Roger Moore, and finally the first Death Wish film starring Charles Bronson. In pop music entertainment, where there were still such things as vinyl records, hi-fi record players, and station-tuned radio sets, the 10 most popular tunes in 1974, according to Billboard magazine, from descending order, we have number 10, The Rubettes with Sugar Baby Love. Number 9, Paul McCartney and Wings with Band on the Run. Number 8, The Hollies with The Air That I Breathe. Number 7, The Steve Miller Band with The Joker. Number 6, Barbra Streisand with The Way We Were. Number 5, Bachman Turner Overdrive with You Ain't Seen Nothing Yet. Number 4, ABBA with Waterloo. Number 3, George McRae with Rock Your Baby. Number 2, Terry Jacks with Seasons in the Sun. And the number 1 hit single for the year 1974 was Kung Fu Fighting, performed by Carl Douglas. Well, folks, I guess that about puts finish to this episode. And before I say goodbye, I'd like to thank everybody who listened to this and invite you to stick around with me as I continue this podcast. If you would be so kind, please like and subscribe to this channel for more episodes, and if you have any comments or suggestions, then please feel free to post them in the comments section below, and it would be greatly appreciated. So until next time, this is Larry, aka the Charming Curmudgeon. So long for now.